My husband cheated on me and said that his wallet was stolen at the hotel. But when I searched his bag, I found a pack of contraceptives. A few months ago, on a regular Monday morning, I was in the midst of our hectic routine, preparing our 3 kids for school. At 8, the hustle was interrupted by the loud ringing of the phone. I wondered who could be calling so early. The caller ID displayed an unknown code, sparking my curiosity even more. "Hi?" I answered warily, holding the phone to my ear. To my astonishment, it was my husband, Mark, on the other end. I couldn't help but wonder why he was calling when we had just spoken the night before. Mark works for a small advertising agency, and his call immediately grabbed my attention. I take care of our children and work from home, while he is always on the move, working at a publishing company in the city center. Despite our different schedules, we managed to make a decent living and lived in a charming suburban house with 3 bedrooms and a garden. We were lucky to have a wide circle of friends. However, Mark told me that the previous night, when he went to the hotel lobby to get a coffee, his wallet was stolen. "Please cancel our bank cards immediately and request new ones urgently," he said, sounding stressed. "I've already informed my manager about this and shall arrange for new corporate cards to be sent to me overnight so I can have them before I leave tomorrow. She's also going to transfer some money to help me through this," he added. "You're usually very cautious with your belongings. Can you explain what happened?" I asked. Unfortunately, I was a bit distracted and left my wallet at the counter while I went to grab some snacks. When I returned, it was gone. The cashier mentioned she was busy with another customer and didn't notice anything unusual. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff are checking the nearby areas. I hope they find it, otherwise I might have to rely on a taxi for today's meeting. "Don't worry, I'll handle the bank cards promptly. I apologize for my mistake, dear." Hopefully, apart from about $900 in my wallet, we won't face any additional expenses. We can replace the other cards gradually. Luckily, most of my things are still in the room, so I'll be prepared for the morning presentation. "How are the kids? I miss the times when we were all together," he recounted. 7 weeks ago, I successfully canceled the bank cards before any unauthorized charges were made. However, the wallet containing his driver's license and other non-bank card items had yet to be recovered, so I put that concern aside. Life continued as usual, but I have something important to share today. I came across a statement from Mark's investment account where he manages a separate fund from the inheritance he received after his parents' tragic accident a few years ago. I've always respected his privacy concerning this account, but while searching for our home insurance policy, I stumbled upon a folder containing monthly statements from his personal account. I recalled that the inheritance amounted to around $500,000 following his parents' passing, and I couldn't help but wonder how much it had grown. To my pleasant surprise, it had expanded to over $550,000. While going through the statement, I noticed a withdrawal of $4,500 from the money market account about 7 weeks ago. My curiosity was aroused regarding how he had used that money, so I decided to delve deeper into his money market account. To my shock, I discovered that he had written a substantial check to a local jeweler just a couple of days after losing his wallet in the same city. I couldn't help but wonder what he had purchased at that jewelry store. He hadn't mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard him discuss acquiring jewelry for anyone else. Although he has a sister, I couldn't understand why she would need a $4,500 gift. After some thought, I decided to turn to the computer and visit the jewelry store's website. I jotted down their phone number for further inquiry. I picked up the phone and dialed the jewelry store's number. A woman introduced herself as a store representative and asked how she could help. After giving my name and specifying the transaction I wanted to ask about, I explained that we had an issue with the purchase and were wondering if there was a store warranty in place. She looked up the transaction in her computer and then asked about the problem with the jewelry. I was momentarily confused, wondering what kind of jewelry he could have bought. Fortunately, the woman on the phone quickly clarified, "Oh, I remember this purchase." When he visited our store, he was visibly upset and mentioned that his wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. He wanted to replace them, which proved to be quite a challenge. While we were looking for suitable options, he used the company's credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned the issue with the jewelry, I'd like to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty for such situations. Is it possible that the diamond setting has become loose? This was confusing because Mark spoke of replacing the wedding and engagement rings, but never mentioned that he had lost them, only saying his wallet was stolen. It took me some time to process this new information. "Listen," I told the woman on the phone, "I need to discuss this with my husband before making any decisions. I'll get back to you later." With that, I hung up. While she seemed somewhat puzzled, my own confusion was far greater. It was becoming clear that the rings were in his wallet when it was stolen. But why would he carry them in his wallet if he had no intention of hiding his marital status from others? To the best of my knowledge, there were no professional reasons related to hiding one's marital status. However, if he wanted to appear unmarried in certain social situations, troubling thoughts began to fill my mind, suggesting that he might have thought about having an affair while away from home. The mere idea made my stomach turn. We had been married for 12 years and were blessed with 3 wonderful children, Sam, aged 9, and Emily, aged 7. I believed we had a perfect marriage and a happy family. Our personal life seemed fulfilling to me, or at least that's what I had believed. He traveled once a month, staying for 2 or 3 nights in distant cities. If he had such intentions, he might have seen it as a discreet opportunity. It seemed that losing the rings had deeply disturbed him, leading him to opt for replacements that closely resembled the originals. I had purchased those rings with my modest earnings, so they were not extravagant, and creating a near replica wasn't too expensive. He could have reported the loss to the insurance company, but I probably would have found out. If his wallet was genuinely stolen at the hotel, he should have reported it. I couldn't help but wonder what he claimed as missing. I decided to find the hotel's contact number and made the call. I asked about any records related to the theft of my husband's belongings. Surprisingly, they confirmed having a written account of the incident. I requested a copy to be emailed to me, and I received it shortly. The report was composed and signed by Mark himself. In the statement, Mark mentioned that his wallet was stolen while he was dancing in the hall. He had left his wallet at the booth where he was sitting, and upon his return, it was gone. Remarkably, Mark explicitly noted his hesitation to involve the police. As I took in this information, my thoughts raced, overwhelmed by the implications of what I had found. He had lied to me not only by hiding the truth about the stolen rings, but also by making up a story about shoplifting. While there could be another explanation, my mind couldn't come up with anything other than the unsettling thoughts swirling in my head. It became clear that I needed to understand the significance of losing those rings, or else they would continue to occupy my thoughts and drive me crazy. One thing was increasingly evident: those rings were in his wallet when he was dancing with an unknown person. Several weeks had passed since the incident, and he was about to leave on another trip in a few days. I realized I needed to get more details about his schedule for the upcoming trip. I wanted to understand what he typically did in the evenings away from home. If he was involved with other people, perhaps losing the rings had been a wake-up call, making him reconsider his actions. I knew that if I discovered his infidelity, it would likely mean the end of our marriage, though I dreaded considering how it might affect our children. He was undoubtedly a great father, but I couldn't bear the thought of him having custody of the kids, especially with his frequent business trips. My mind raced desperately, looking for any potential clues to reveal his faithfulness. What other information might hint at his actions during his trips? Did he engage in unprotected encounters or insist on using contraceptives? I assumed he would opt for protection because he wouldn't want to risk bringing home infections or the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. After all, I had a vasectomy after the birth of our second child, making pregnancy impossible. He couldn't rely on the people he met having protection, so he must have had his own supply. One question remained: where did he keep them? It was unlikely he stored them at our house or in the car, so the office seemed the most likely place. He probably carried them with him on business trips. I knew he transported his work papers, laptop, and presentation materials in a large briefcase he kept in his office, but if he had an early morning flight, he'd bring his bag home the night before, then pack it in a suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before his departure. I hoped his next trip involved an early morning flight. I made a deliberate choice to stay calm and composed, not showing any signs that something was wrong. As it happened, when the kids returned from school, I was busy with various tasks and had little time to dwell on my suspicions. Nonetheless, the fear of his infidelity continued to linger in the back of my mind. When Mark returned from work, I found myself in a bit of a mess while preparing dinner. I accidentally spilled a dish of beans, creating a mess on the floor. The resulting chaos of cleaning up and managing the kids' activities left me looking somewhat disheveled. Fortunately, he didn't seem to notice any unusual behavior from me at that moment. After the commotion settled and everything was cleaned up, I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table, as we usually did, to enjoy dinner and engage in our typical chit-chat. Given our usual routine, I didn't expect him to have any growing suspicions about his upcoming trip. "So, you're heading out on another trip in a couple of days?" I asked. "Yes," he replied with little enthusiasm. "It's the same old routine. I'm not looking forward to it." My curiosity prompted me to dig deeper. "If you don't enjoy it, have you thought about applying for a different role? You've been with the company for quite a while and have a good understanding of various aspects of its operations. I think you could adapt to almost any position." He mentioned his desire to gain more experience before moving to a desk job. However, I gently appealed to his conscience. "The kids and I really miss you when you're not home," I added, hoping to evoke a sense of guilt. "I know. I'm sorry," he responded sympathetically. "I miss all of you too." Looking for more details, I continued. "So where exactly are you headed this time? Will you be leaving in the morning, giving us a chance to spend some time together before you go?" I held his gaze, mindful that our children could hear us. Despite trying to appear normal, my anxiety was evident as my stomach churned, making it hard to eat. He seemed to think everything was fine, as his reaction mirrored mine. I wondered if he had stomach issues, but it turned out he was eating without much enjoyment. Perhaps my suspicions were unfounded, but the urge to search his briefcase still lingered, as it could potentially provide insight into his loyalty. "I'm only going to Newton, so I'll be leaving tomorrow morning at 7:30, he mentioned. "I need something to keep me going until I return on Saturday," he added playfully, giving me a wink. I responded in a similar playful manner, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. To my surprise, he blushed in response. His comment about bringing his briefcase home the night before his trip suggested he wouldn't be stopping at the office before heading to the airport. Given his seemingly genuine attitude about the upcoming trip in front of our children and me, one might assume that either he hadn't been involved in any infidelity during his travels, or he had become skilled at hiding such behavior. I hoped to uncover the truth when I examined the contents of his briefcase. On the evening before his planned trip, Mark returned home in high spirits. He parked his car next to mine in the garage as usual, and appeared visibly excited. This left me wondering if his excitement was due to our conversation, or if there was another reason behind it. Upon entering the house, he didn't bring his briefcase with him, assuming it was still in the car. I was busy preparing dinner, so we sat down at the table. He casually asked if I could retrieve his suitcase from the garage after we finished eating. "Sure," I replied, trying not to show any signs of suspicion. "Are you all set for your trip?" he asked, trying to reassure me. "Oh yes, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with the essentials." In an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy, I inquired, "Do you have any plans while you're away?" "No, the kids and I will stick to our usual daily routine during the week. Maybe we can plan something family-friendly for the weekend," he replied, showing enthusiasm for the idea. "Sounds good," I responded genuinely. After we finished dinner, he kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher. Once we were done, he headed to the bedroom to pack his things, while I made my way to the garage to retrieve his suitcase. Upon inspecting the car, I didn't find the briefcase inside, leading me to believe it was securely placed in the trunk. Expecting this, I had already come up with a plan to access it later in the evening. When I returned to the bedroom with his suitcase, I casually asked, "Do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be slowly losing air. If I take it to the station, Steve can fix it right away." For a brief moment, he looked puzzled but then reached for his wallet, handing me the car keys. He suggested, "Couldn't you just use the spare tire? It's meant for emergencies." Taking a firm stance, I responded, "Yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this. I think that's the best option." I hurried back to the garage before he could change his mind. Quickly, I drove his car out of the garage and headed to the gas station owned by my friend Steve from school. Pulling up in front of one of the service bays, I honked my horn to get his attention. Steve noticed me and opened the bay door, allowing me to drive in before closing it behind me. "What's up, buddy?" Steve asked curiously. "My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I needed some time to check something else," I replied. Sensing that I might have some issues at home, he asked, "Problems at home, buddy?" "Possibly," I admitted reluctantly, opening the trunk and retrieving Mark's briefcase. Placing it on a nearby workbench, I unlocked it. Steve, realizing a customer needed him, simply said, "Well, I've got a customer, so take your time, my friend." Nodding to Steve, he returned to the small shop attached to his station. I began to search the briefcase meticulously, ensuring that I didn't disturb anything. My hands explored the pockets on the lid unnecessarily, and to my shock, I discovered a package that caught my attention. When I removed it, my heart sank as I realized it was an open package of contraceptives, with about 4 pieces missing. My worst fears were confirmed. I carefully placed the package back where I found it and closed the briefcase once more. I put it in the trunk and secured it, just as Steve returned. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "What's going on?" he asked with obvious curiosity. "I'm afraid so," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of disappointment and sadness. "Mind if I stay here a bit longer? Maybe you could check the tire pressure while I pretend to have fixed the issue." Steve gave me a curious look but complied without saying a word. He truly was a loyal friend. While he attended to the tire pressure, I drove out of the bay and pulled up at a gas station. I filled the tank with fuel, unsure of when I would do that for him again. My thoughts were filled with gratitude toward Steve for his understanding as I made my way back home. As I pulled into the garage, a sense of darkness seemed to envelop my thoughts, and panic began to intensify, fueled by anger and frustration. It was difficult to comprehend how he could betray our marriage, our children, and me in such a manner. Amid the receding emotions, I shifted my focus to planning my next steps. To secure custody of our children, I needed concrete evidence of his infidelity and misconduct. Despite his shortcomings as a partner, I acknowledged his role as a good father. The children deserved a parental figure in their lives, and while visitation rights would likely be granted, my ultimate goal was to gain full legal custody. He will have to explain the reasons behind our divorce to his sister and friends. As I entered the house, I called out from the bedroom saying, "Everything's set. It was just a minor issue with a nail." "Okay, thanks," he replied, still avoiding eye contact. Seeking solace, I went to the kitchen for a drink and then settled in the family room with the kids, who were absorbed in watching a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Mark joined us in the room and sat beside me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled, but a deep sadness washed over me as I realized our once happy family was soon to be a thing of the past. To my surprise, Mark moved closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear. He asked, "Are you ready for tonight?" After taking a sip of my drink, I replied, "I think so, but I have a stomachache." Mark sympathetically responded, "Oh, that's too bad, honey." Holding on to me, Mark softly said, "I love you," and I instinctively put my arm around his shoulders. Grappling with mixed feelings despite his betrayal, there was still a hint of affection from him. I couldn't help but wonder why he did it. Was it for excitement or a need for more connection than I could provide? I might never fully understand, but what was clear was the damage to my trust in him. We put the kids to bed together, and as he kissed our little angels goodnight, I couldn't help but look at him, knowing that by morning he would be gone. Their young minds were already accustomed to his frequent travels, so their unease was minimal. That night, we were intimate, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, Mark asked anxiously, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can handle it." Desperately hoping he would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip, I asked, "Do you really need to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it were all just a nightmare that would vanish. He sighed and replied apologetically, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up and return home as soon as I can. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with all of you." With a heavy heart, I sighed and said, "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now so I won't have to worry about it in the morning." "Okay," he replied. While he stepped into the shower, an impulse led me to inspect his suitcase to see what he had packed. Though the clothes on top seemed businesslike, I was surprised to find, upon closer examination, a selection of his most seductive underwear and a small black suit in which he always looked dashing. Respecting his personal space, I carefully returned everything to its place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, and when I heard Mark moving around at 500 in the morning, I stayed in bed, choosing not to say goodbye as was our custom. I felt a mix of weariness and sadness. Leaning down to give me a kiss on the cheek before leaving, he asked, "Still not feeling well, honey?" I simply nodded, struggling to express the turmoil within me. With the sound of the garage door closing, I finally got out of bed and made my way to the shower. I knew the day ahead would be filled with challenges. After seeing the kids off to school and having breakfast, I turned to the phone book to look for private investigator services in the yellow pages. My main goal was to find an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably in the city Mark was heading to. I reached out to several agencies and eventually found one with a branch in his destination area. I set up a meeting with them for the same morning, hoping they could provide the necessary information. Next on my list was finding a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a specific lawyer, so I found his contact details and gave him a call. I arranged an appointment for the afternoon, hoping this lawyer could guide me through the challenging process we were about to face. When I arrived at the private investigator's office, I discussed my concerns and arranged for Mark to be watched on the evening he was away. I gave them a photo of Mark and details of his travel route to help with identification. They assured me they would gather photos and compile a report on his activities as soon as his business day was over. To ensure smooth communication, they agreed to send information via email to their Newton office and promised to provide a comprehensive report by Monday morning. Satisfied with their commitment, I made a substantial upfront payment for their services. They informed me they might not be able to capture photographs, but they would try to provide as many incriminating photos as possible. I agreed that it would suffice. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer went as expected. He explained that in our state, divorce follows a no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. However, given that I am the primary caregiver for our children, it's likely I will be granted custody. It was important for me to understand that Mark would receive significant visitation rights for our children. Furthermore, our property would be divided equally, with both sides getting an even split of 50. Alimony wouldn't be necessary due to our similar incomes, but since I would have custody of the children, Mark would be required to pay alimony. As for the inheritance he received, it held no significance to me, and he needed to keep it for himself. My main priority was the well-being of our children. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the necessary documents to be delivered to Mark on Monday, citing irreconcilable differences. I also asked him to agree to leave our house immediately upon our divorce. The lawyer confirmed that as the children's guardian, I had the authority to make this request. It was decided that once the children reached 18, we would sell the house, and the proceeds would be divided between us. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that life would move forward for me and the children, while Mark would have to face the consequences of his betrayal. At that moment, I didn't take immediate action concerning our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I assumed I'd have enough time to address these issues after serving him with divorce papers. Given his inheritance, I believed he wouldn't have to worry about his share of our joint savings. When it was time for school to end, I headed home to catch the bus. On Saturday afternoon, when Mark returned, I kindly offered to take care of his laundry, but he politely declined, saying he would handle it later. I couldn't help but smile, knowing how playfully mischievous I had been. Deep down, I fully understood why he preferred to do the laundry himself. It was crucial for him to keep his extramarital affairs hidden at all costs. Later, as we lay in bed, Mark expressed concern about my ongoing stomach issues and suggested I see a doctor. This has been going on for too long, he emphasized. I playfully responded to Mark, letting him know that I intended to try a new medication recommended by a friend to address my persistent stomach problems. I expressed hope that this would resolve the issue and bring him back to me soon. When we embraced, he whispered that he missed me greatly. On Monday, as the kids left for school and Mark headed to work, I received a call from the detective agency informing me that they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there shortly, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager discussing the details. The office manager informed me that a report with attached photos had been emailed from Newton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but upon a quick scan and a glance at the photos, it seemed highly incriminating. I took a copy of the report and started reading its contents. The subject of the report was identified as Mark Anderson. According to the report records, the surveillance of the man began at 5:45 p.m. on Tuesday, May 12th, in the lobby of the Newton Hilton Hotel. His identity was confirmed by comparing a photo obtained from the Westfield office. Upon closer examination of the report, it turned out that he was wearing a company badge, further confirming his identity. Moreover, the report detailed the movements of the subject and noted he was carrying a briefcase when he entered the elevator. A staff member accompanied him and verified his arrival at room 212 at 5:48 p.m. It's important to note that the report emphasized that the subject was alone at that time. Additionally, the report included a photograph labeled Exhibit 1A, showing the subject dressed professionally before entering the room. When looking at the photo, it was clear he still wore rings. Evidently, the photo was taken discreetly using a mobile phone. The report stated that the agents had rented a room across from the subject's room. At 7 p.m., they received a signal that the subject had left his room and was heading for the elevator. A minute later, at 7:01 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted he was dressed as described in Example 1B. Upon examining Example 1B, it became evident that Mark was wearing a small black suit paired with dress shoes. He was also adorned with a watch I had given him for our 15th anniversary celebration. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on his left hand. The photo showed clearly that he wasn't wearing them. The report mentioned that the staff had rented a room across from his. A minute later, at 7:01 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted he was dressed as described in Example 1B. Upon examining Example 1B, it was clear that Mark was wearing a small black suit paired with dress shoes. He was also adorned with a watch I had given him for our 15th anniversary celebration. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on his left hand. The photo clearly showed he wasn't wearing them. The photo identified as Exhibit 1D displays Mark and a woman in a tight embrace, engaged in a passionate kiss while seated in a booth. The intensity of their connection was clearly visible in the picture. At 10:45 p.m., the report noted that both individuals left the restaurant. They then took the elevator and went to Mark's floor. Another photo labeled Exhibit 1E captures the moment when Mark and the woman entered his room, specifically room 212. In this image, Mark appears slightly intoxicated, but undeniably pleased with the evening's events. At 1:05 a.m., the woman exited Mark's room and left the building. The report included the license plate number of a car registered to Catherine L. Evans, residing at 9632 River Road in Newton. Notably, Catherine L. Evans was married and had 3 young children. As I read further into the report's details, it became clear that Mark repeated his actions the following night with another woman. The report bore the signature of an investigator from Newton. This discovery filled me with deep anxiety and resentment. It became clear that my husband was leading a promiscuous life while he was away from home. I couldn't come to terms with his actions. It was a betrayal that exceeded my worst fears. Even the fact that Mark had lost his wedding rings didn't stop him from being careless. After settling the bill with the private detective, I thanked them and left. I made sure to take 2 additional copies of the report, which were saved on a USB drive, to keep them secure. Once I got back home, I wasted no time and immediately called my divorce attorney. I asked about the status of the divorce papers, and the attorney confirmed they were ready for filing. Without hesitation, I instructed them to initiate the filing process and specifically requested that the papers be served to him publicly at his workplace the following day. The attorney assured me that this could be done smoothly and asked for his workplace address, which I promptly provided. My intentions were clear. I wanted to humiliate him during the legal proceedings. Serving him the divorce papers at his workplace not only satisfied my desire for revenge, but also served as a form of justice for his actions. That night, there was no affection between us. Mark seemed to sense that something was wrong, perhaps suspecting that I had discovered something unsettling. Though he didn't directly voice his concerns, he expressed hope for my quick recovery. Interestingly, he also appeared somewhat distant, but I chose not to comment on it and simply ignored it. The next morning, I woke up early after a night of little sleep. I immersed myself in work on the computer until I heard the children waking up, and then I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After the meal, I said goodbye to Mark when he left for work. He approached me for a hug and a kiss, but I responded with a half-hearted embrace, encouraging him to leave quickly. At that moment, I sensed he might have had an idea of what was coming. As I closed the door behind him, tears welled up in his eyes and he whispered, "I love you." After his departure, profound sadness washed over me, and I felt an urge to release my tears. Yet I quickly composed myself as the children needed my attention, and I needed to prepare them for the school bus. Around 9:30 a.m., the phone rang, disrupting our morning routine. Displaying Mark's workplace on the caller ID, I answered the call without uttering a word. There was a brief pause as the caller realized I wasn't inclined to engage in conversation. In a trembling voice and a whisper, Mark said, "I'm sorry." Shortly after, the line went silent, and I remained quiet as well. Mark didn't return home that night, and I wondered if he continued his deceitful game, seemingly indifferent to his family. While I knew my anger was justified, I also considered that I might have been too harsh on him. The children, saddened by their father's absence, wondered where he was. To lift their spirits, I invited them to have dinner at a local diner. By the time we returned home after dinner, the kids were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Mark called with a request. "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" Initially, a sense of guilt welled up within me, but it quickly faded. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 10 and 1? Then the kids and I won't be here." Regarding our conversation, I made it clear that I'd speak with him one-on-one in my lawyer's office only after he signed, notarized, and returned the divorce documents. "Then I'll listen to whatever you have to say," I added. There was a sob on the line before Mark answered, "All right." Shortly after, the phone went silent again. He signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially ended. It turned out that he became a parent during the affair. Unfortunately, when he tried to hide it from his last lover, contraception failed. Considering it was near the childbearing age, even if I hadn't found out about his infidelity through the lost rings, the truth would probably have come out eventually. There were rumors that he had started dating again. If he ever gets close to getting married again, I've thought about honestly warning his future spouse about his unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for him to deceive and hurt another person. We had a meeting, and during our conversation in my lawyer's office, I shared my thoughts with him. He pleaded with me to reconsider the divorce decision. He talked about how difficult it was for him not to have unrestricted access to our children. However, I explained that I couldn't trust him anymore. Then he mentioned that he had seen a psychologist who diagnosed him with hypersexuality. He assured me that his impulses were now under control. Despite his explanations, I told him that it wasn't enough for me. Even if he claimed to have his urges in check, the fact that he hadn't sought help earlier indicated a lack of proactive effort on his part. If he had addressed his desires from the beginning, he might not have found himself in the current situation. When I left the lawyer's office, he continued to cry. Having recently reconnected with a school friend who keeps me updated, I learned that he works at a nightclub. He mentioned seeing my ex-husband at the club where he works on several weekend nights. He frequents the club with different partners and behaves provocatively. I was deeply hurt that my children have such an irresponsible father. Perhaps my ex-husband never recovered from hypersexuality. A friend of Mark's also called me and informed me that Mark was in poor health. She said my ex-husband needed my help because he had contracted an STD. Meanwhile, he continued his promiscuous lifestyle. I sympathized with him, but conveyed that I couldn't offer any help, nor did I want to. Mark chose this lifestyle and its associated health issues. I began dating again, and it seems I found someone special. This man, around my age and divorced himself, discovered his ex-wife's infidelity and didn't tolerate such behavior. He possesses strength and resilience, qualities I genuinely admire. It seems that my children also like him. I believe this is a natural progression, and it's only a matter of time before I consider taking our relationship to a new level.